Welcome to Evilive. Evilive is a media commentary show that answers the question, what needs must the devil drives? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we are reviewing Baz Luhrmann's Elvis. Oh man, come on, look at that guy. Goddamn king. He's king for the reasons we're about to lay out here, but also just because he's a badass. I grew up with Elvis. I have to give props to my parents because it was their 45 collection of all sorts of Motown, blues, soul, pop, music from their era that I really cut my teeth on musically. And so it was really, really fantastic once I started diving into Elvis. And of course, it was his old stuff from those 45s, Hound Dog and Jailhouse Rock and such. But the older I got, the more I got into his older stuff, and then the 68 Comeback Special, and so on and so forth. So my journey with Elvis has been since I was that big. Love this guy. I found out that Baz Luhrmann's doing Elvis show, and I'm blown away. I remember I first saw his films with Moulin Rouge, and my wife and I have watched that, I don't know, maybe 35 times. We love it. We think it's great. We love his mix of contemporary music with music of the age of whatever it is that he's filming. I'm a massive Great Gatsby fan, and so when he came out with that, it just blew me away. I love the novel. I just thought it was great, but the film was on another level. Some people had problems with it because it mixed hip hop with jazz. I personally don't mind the mix, and I think what jazz was in the day is very, very similar to what hip hop is in the time that he released it. So I thought it was an appropriate and well-joined mix of music. So whenever you're thinking about Luhrmann's films, you're thinking about visual spectacles, you're thinking about musical mashups, and you're thinking about heightened senses in storytelling. So when it comes to Elvis, who's already heightened senses visually, I was really curious about where he was going to go with it. And holy shit. Oh, I don't want to forget Romeo and Juliet, which is amazing that he did Romeo plus Juliet. Great film. He's always done amazing stuff. I haven't seen Australia, but I'm sure it's going to be as good as everything else he's done. So I was very, very excited. Okay, that being said, this is directed by Baz Luhrmann, screenplay by him, Sam Brommel, Craig Pierce, and Jeremy Donner. This was released June 24, 2022. Yes, I know I'm late to the party and getting this review out there. However, it was just recently released on HBO Max, which is where I saw it the second and third time. So... And then it pulled me down a rabbit hole is what it did. I watched it in the theaters the first time when it was out. And then I came home, watched a bunch of documentaries about Elvis, and then watched a bunch of Elvis films. And then it came out on HBO Max. I'm already watching House of the Dragon. You all know that. And so I just went down even more of a rabbit hole of more documentaries and more films. I can't help but love Elvis. It's just in my DNA. In Pulp Fiction, when... Travolta's character is asked, are you a Beatles or an Elvis guy? Elvis all the way. It's not even a question. Like, of course. I know Beatles people. They're not real human. they're fake human. Elvis people are real humans. Like, you gotta love the rockabilly. You gotta love the style, the swagger, the moves, the mashup between a incredibly charismatic white young man and influential gospel rhythm and blues background. And here's something I want to say before I even get into the film review. I'm so tired about people bitching and moaning about how Elvis stole or appropriated black culture and then rode its back to his own fame. Bullshit. Bullshit. Hound Dog? Yes, it was sung by a lot of black musicians. Elvis made it famous. And it was written by two white Jews. So I don't know where you guys are getting your fucking insistence that he appropriated culture. He was raised in those abject areas of poverty. He was informed by what he was raised around, as we all are. So that's not stealing the culture. That's being influenced by the culture because of your socioeconomic position in life. And then he took what he already knew. He wasn't stealing from people. He took what he knew and he used it to propel himself to fame with the help of Colonel Parker. It was not stealing other people's shit. If you know anything about blues or country or soul back in the day or gospel, everyone recorded everyone else's music. That was a very common thing to do. So it's not like this one person wrote this song like it is nowadays, and you cannot use it unless you're going to sample it in some way. No. Back then, people recorded each other's music. It just happened. So we need to get over this bullshit lie that Elvis was just stealing culture. He was not. He made it his own, he made it better, and he made it to the top. All right. Now, the film's budget was $85 million. He... Baz Luhrmann, not Elvis, ended up grossing $281.6 million with it. And there's supposed to be a 4-hour cut of this thing. So, I mean, just, straight up, I love this film because I love Baz Luhrmann and I love Elvis, and how could you not love the mashup? But if there's a 4-hour cut of this, I've got to own this. I've waited on buying this because I wanted to see if there's going to be special editions or special features. I need that 4-hour cut desperately bad in my life. So please, Baz, buddy, pal, hook a brother up. All right? Give me the 4-hour cut. Release it. You will make money. That's the only reason you need. But also, there's those of us who love Elvis as much as you do. Hook us up. All right. So, this is just a little tidbit fact here. The second highest grossing musical biopic ever after Bohemian Rhapsody. The second. What I think contributed to its not widespread, I mean, it clearly made a ton of money. And it was like in its first week, I think it was Top Gun's second week, it blew Top Gun out of the water. So it did really well when it was released. But it could have done infinitely better. I think it wasn't because Elvis has had a ton of made-for-TV movies and miniseries about his life. And so I think people went in, saw, if they were even aware that it came out, they thought, well, I already know the story. How is this going to be any different? But the fact is, it is very different because it tells it from a very different perspective. And it doesn't just hyper-focus on one moment of his life. It focuses on the entire career from birth. Well, I mean, it doesn't show him coming out of his mom's vag, but it's close to his very, very early childhood and abject poverty to his death. So, and it does it through the lens that's different than all the others. So here's the log line. The life of American music icon Elvis Presley from his childhood to becoming a rock and movie star in the 1950s while maintaining a complex relationship with his manager, Colonel Tom Parker. And really the truth is this is told through the lens of Colonel Tom Parker, played by Tom Hanks, and it's how he didn't really control Elvis, but rather he tried to steer Elvis in directions. And yes, he abused him. And yes, he took incredible sums of money from him. And it doesn't hide that fact. In fact, it's right there, on the shelf as you're watching it. But it's just an interesting way because we get to see Elvis for the first time in the same manner that Colonel Tom Parker saw him for the first time. Because Colonel Tom Parker worked in the circus. He knew how to get rubes into a circus tent and bilk them of their money. He called it a snow job, but that sounds a little too sexual to me. So it always bugged me that they always kept saying snow job in the film, and I kept thinking of infantile things. So I just thought it was fascinating. And Tom Hanks does a wonderful job as this, well, I mean, arguably a villain, but then a villain who did actually propel Elvis to heights that arguably he never would have been able to propel himself to. So yes, he took care of him. Yes, he took advantage of him. Yes, he helped him. And all of that can be true at the same time. He can be a monster and a supporting actor in Elvis's career at the exact same time, and he was. And I like that they didn't shy away from it. They didn't gloss over it. They didn't make him an abject villain. I mean, it was a very complex relationship that these two had, of dependent, codependent relationship. And I really appreciate that. Okay, so that being said, the film follows the life of him, told from the perspective of Colonel Tom Parker, as mentioned. The cast is really, we're going to just focus on the three people that are the biggest, most influential aspects of Elvis's life, and that's himself. And yes, I know his mom and dad played a huge role in his life. I'm just not going to address them as much. I'll gloss over that bit. But Austin Butler played Elvis Presley. And Austin Butler is a natural blonde. So was Elvis. He dyed his hair. But he wasn't even on the radar of Baz Luhrmann to cast him in the role of Elvis. So Austin Butler recorded this song, I think it was Love Me Tender, but he felt it was too cheesy to send as a demo tape. And then he started thinking about his own mother, who passed at the exact same age as Elvis's mother passed. And so he felt like he could tap into that emotional resonance, right? So he recorded himself singing Unchained Melody, and he sent it off to Baz Luhrmann, who then thought this was some sort of like meltdown by an actor. He didn't even realize it was like a demo tape or something to get the job, get the gig. Denzel Washington ended up reaching out to Baz Luhrmann saying, look, you got to hire this kid. He's perfect for Elvis. And it's a good thing he listened, because he ended up blending in seamlessly as Elvis with archival footage, with his vocals and performance. It was beautiful. So as far as the singing goes, I mean, you can't really fake Elvis, but they did fake Elvis, and there's so many impersonators that, yeah, you can technically fake him. So in the younger years of Elvis in this film, it's all Austin Butler singing, which is amazing, because it sounds just like young Elvis. And in the older years, it's mostly Elvis being dubbed over Austin's voice, but they blend it a little bit, so it's not entirely just Elvis, so it feels a little bit more believable. But that just makes it so much infinitely better, you know? I mean, that's why Bohemian Rhapsody was so good, because he did the vocal coaches, and they got people who sounded just like him. And so anyway, they did that in this, and it was amazing. Tom Hanks, again, it's Tom Hanks. What are you going to do? He's great. He's great in everything he does. Olivia DeJonge is Priscilla Presley, and that's important because Priscilla Presley plays an infinitely important role in Elvis's life. He is convinced that he wants this family, but really, he can't fill the hole of empty love in his heart with anything but his fan base. And so he thought he wanted a family, but he never spent time with them because he was always on tour, and if not on tour, then on stage at his residency in Vegas. And so he clearly didn't really want family, but that's what is ingrained in his head from his youth and his mother. And the loss of his mother created that huge vacuum inside of him. And so he tried to fill it up with whatever he could. And it ended up just being fans and the obsessive need to be on stage performing for those fans. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing for a performer to have that need, that vacuum, that hole inside of them, except when it's being filled also with drugs to maintain this lifestyle that he has. And that ultimately, as we all know, is his ultimate downfall is too much drug abuse, and which was encouraged and outright done against his will in some cases, or not will, but knowledge, when he collapsed out of exhaustion or stuff through Colonel Tom Parker and their doctor. So the film was nominated for 3 Hollywood Critics Association Mid-Season Film Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Baz Luhrmann, and Best Actor for Austin Butler. And on July 1st, 2022, the film won Best Actor for Butler. These awards are among the film's first accolades, but I suspect there's going to be much more come Oscar season. Luhrmann, okay, let's see. So it went on to debut $31.2 million, beating out holdover Top Gun Maverick. Lisa Marie Presley, Elvis's daughter, praised the film in an Instagram post after seeing it twice, calling it nothing short of a spectacular. She went on to praise Butler's performance as her late father, stating that he had channeled and embodied my father's heart and soul beautifully. In my humble opinion, again, this is Lisa Marie Presley, his performance is unprecedented and finely done accurately and respectfully. let's see, Vernon, Elvis's father, actually remarried in 1960, and it didn't show that. There's a lot of things where this film doesn't fill in all the gaps. It hits highlights. So his father remarrying in 1960 and then dying of a heart attack 2 years after his son's death, though is tragic and emotional as a family story, doesn't really have any bearing in the narrative of Elvis as a film, and so they didn't really include it at all. And the entire film was shot in Queensland, Australia. I didn't know that either. I think that's fantastic. The real Colonel Tom Parker was born in June 26, 1909 in the Netherlands as Andreas Dries van Kuijik. And at the age of 19, he entered the U.S. illegally. And after a few months, he enlisted in the Army and took the name Tom Parker. Because of this enlistment in a foreign army, he forfeited his Dutch citizenship, rendering him effectively a stateless person. And he used that as a legal argument when he was being sued by the Elvis estate after Elvis's death. And, because he was taking 50% of everything Elvis did on top of merchandising and everything else. He was ripping off Elvis his entire career. So he is straight up a gambling. What do they call them when they're like a failed gambler? It's like a junkie, but for a gambler, a degenerate gambler, where he would just lose massive sums of money gambling, but he couldn't help it because he was addicted to gambling. And so he kept taking more and more money from Elvis, booking Elvis more gigs to fuel this need, this addiction of his. It was this very, very poisonous state of being that he was living in. But then he used, the fact that he wasn't any citizen. He's like, you can't sue me because I'm not a member of the U.S. I'm not a citizen. So you don't have any rights legally against me, which is bullshit. And they ended up suing him anyway. And of course it worked. So, the biggest parts, the sort of takeaways about this film was how they portrayed his early childhood, living in those really downtrodden shotgun houses and rolling with the black kids in his neighborhood because they were the only kids in his neighborhood. He was the only white kid. And then ultimately when the New Deal started hitting the country and government housing was starting to be built, they moved into government housing, but he would still go back to Beale Street and he would still be influenced by black culture because that's what he knew. That was his informative years. And going to church, he was an evangelical Christian. It was a huge part of his upbringing. I am clearly not. And I don't like the Christian religion at all. However, I love me some gospel music. I can't help it. It's great. How do you not like it? So I can connect with him on that level, though not the faith side of it, which I don't need to connect with him or anything. I just love his music. But it was fascinating because he would go and see these little speakeasy performances of these just local residency blues musicians playing songs that he would then end up recording someday. And then he would go and see a gospel choir and a revival session. And just be wildly influenced by that. He would see people walking down the street, and if they had a certain swagger or a sway about them, or if he saw them performing and they had certain moves, he would make little mental notes and say, I'm going to do that when I'm famous. I'm going to do that. One thing that people don't really realize is in school, he was a pretty successful boxer in high school. And so he was a fit kid. That's why when he was doing movies and fight scenes, they didn't really have to work with him that much because he already knew. Boxers have very rigid moves and they got to keep their hands up and it's just the entire form is very fixed and static and it's very important. You got to be fluid on your feet, but you got to protect yourself with your hands, especially in the old school version of boxing. So it was always really fascinating to me that he was actually an athlete in addition to being an incredible singer. And it wasn't until after he performed in school singing for the first time that kids actually made him really popular. They loved his voice and it propelled him from being almost full out outcast to being, the coolest kid in school because of his voice. And eventually he finally convinced himself to go into a recording studio, and they didn't even like him then because he was trying to sing love ballads and stuff like that. They hooked him up with some rockabilly style sort of accompaniment, and that propelled his career immediately. He trailblazed the rockabilly scene, in my opinion. So then we get to see him, making promises to his mom about buying a pink Cadillac and buying her a house and stuff. So that he was obsessed with never being in poverty again. And how could you not? That's how you're raised, right? It just makes sense. You would never want to return to those horrible times. So he was obsessed with making money, and he was obsessed with performing because he got all the adulation that he felt like he never really got anywhere else. And of course, we all know Elvis's story from there. He gets, his career is starting to, they think he's too much of a bad guy, and he's going to be put in jail. And so they have him sign up for the military, goes overseas, meets Priscilla, comes back, marries her. And then, he starts his career all over again through movies and stuff. And by all accounts, he was an amazing actor, but no one wanted to see him just act. They insisted that he sing as well. And so that limited the style of roles that he could get. And so his own success in the music industry was actually the very reason why he couldn't be a successful film actor. Even though you can make the arguments he made so many, it was great. If you've ever watched any Elvis films, there's only like a small handful that are really good. And the others are just carbon copies. And so, he sort of is on the way out. And it's the 68 comeback special where he goes straight up against Colonel Tom Parker's wishes to record his own version of this special. And actually, the producers of it work with him to distract Tom Parker so that they can record 4 hours of material and then cut it together into a 90-minute special and then get it out that Christmas, because it was supposed to be a Christmas special. He's supposed to do his Christmas album, and he didn't want to do that. No one really wants to see him do that, even though I do love his Christmas album. Again, as a non-Christian, I still enjoy Xmas. So after that, his career launches again, and Tom Parker, the colonel, is constantly convincing him not to go overseas because he can't. He doesn't have a passport. He's not a citizen, so he can't leave the country, or else they're going to find out the truth. And he owes so many debts that he has to figure out ways of staying in country and making tons of money. So they do the simulcast around the world, which is the first of its kind. They go around to tons of tour dates, and they do residencies in the International Hotel in Las Vegas. And that's pretty much where Elvis lives the remainder of his life. And of course, he splits with Priscilla, which, how could you not? I mean, she didn't want to be involved with him not being present. Their kid needed a father, and he was not a father. He had to be on stage. And so ultimately, you come into this hating Colonel Tom Parker, rightfully so, and then kind of appreciating him for what he did for Elvis, and then hating him again for what he did to Elvis. And with Elvis, you come into it thinking this is an incredibly talented young man who's being abused and used, and he doesn't have any autonomy, which is his own fault because he doesn't break out of it. But then you realize he's kind of between a rock and a hard place, and his own dependency and his own addiction help force him to stay where he is. And you can't really blame an addict in every case, because that's something that's just in you. That's why people fight with it. They struggle with it. They work on addiction. He never did, really. And he just succumbed to it. And because ultimately it fed what he needed, was that adoration from the fans. And, in the end, when he tries to break away, he can't. There are some scenes where, he's straight up calling out Tom Parker in the International Hotel performances, which never happened. But you needed that to understand the situation of Elvis. And I go into this with every review I ever do. Whenever it's like trying to adapt a book to a film, or whether you're trying to tell a narrative in a story, like a biop in a film context, you can't go into every character and every detail. Sometimes you have to combine characters. As long as you have the tone and you're telling a cohesive story that lines up with the themes of what happened in real life, that's all you really need for a good biop. Every single little minutia of detail does not have to be reiterated and told, because that's not the story. The story is the overarching events that are happening, not every tiny little detail. So I am much more forgiving than a lot of people are when it comes to details not being exact, because I understand, I'm in the creative industry. I understand you have to make concessions in order to get a story told, or in order to sell a narrative. And that's what they did with this. They took some liberties and they sort of bended a little bit, but it wasn't so much that it was an all-out fabrication. It was enough to really sell you on the story. Like, for example, he never sang "Am I Evil" when he got arrested at the mixed. I can't remember what the event was, what the concert was, but anyway, it was a mixed show, and he was making a political statement. One thing that I didn't really fully realize, because again, I was born when he died, so I never saw him in live. I never saw the '68 comeback special when it aired, and so me watching it after the fact, I didn't realize the impact of that final song, the Dream song, which I love it so much. I'm not going to play it here, but I do want to see it real quick. If I Can Dream is the name of it, is what I was looking for. Sorry, the mic is in my way, so I've got to look around the mic. I got this huge white cock right in my face. So yeah, like the fact is it's an amazing film that is the theme of his life, the character of his life, without every single detail being 100% accurate. And Baz Luhrmann does a wonderful job with integrating, once again, modern music with Elvis's music, though I think this is his weakest of album mixings. I just thought Moulin Rouge was arguably one of the best, and The Great Gatsby is, for me, one of the best of his film soundtracks, even though I really do love Romeo and Juliet as well. So I would highly recommend you check this out. Okay, that being said, let me give you my rating here. This is going to come to a surprise to everyone, or no one. 5 Evil Eyes. It's amazing. You have to check this film out. It's on HBO now, or HBO Max if you're watching it. If you're watching the Game of Thrones House of the Dragon, then just scroll over and watch this. It's going to be the best hour-plus time of your life if you love Elvis. And if you are not really educated about Elvis, and there are some people who just, you're a different generation, you're never exposed to him, you don't really get what it's all about, this is your chance to get it. To understand why people still desperately refer to him as the king, why we are obsessive about this man who became a living legend, the greatest performer of all time, albeit silly in some stages of his life, but beautiful nonetheless. Do yourself a favor, check out Elvis, and that is all I have for all of you today. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Evilive. I really do appreciate it. And as always, remember, evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there and be goddamned evil.